Hi BookTube! So before we get too far into March, I wanted to wrap up the month of February. I had a great reading month. I read a total of 35 books, and quite a few were physical books off my shelf, which is like one of my goals this year, although I did read quite a few ebooks. I already wrapped up the first 15 days of February, so now I'm going to be talking about the last 15 days, and I'll start with my physical books and then go to the ebooks, and then I will share with you my total of the books, physical books I've read versus hauling and things like that. So I read a couple books for the Retro Romance Readathon. I am counting this one because it has love in the title, and I thought it was like more of a romance. Jeanette Oak writes a lot of Christian fiction romance, historical fiction, and this one was a romance. It was a love triangle, like from like 1985 or something. So it was like a YA love triangle. So I'm gonna count it for the Retro Romance Readathon because even though it's featuring characters that are like 16 to 18 years old, I think that still counts for a romance. And this is about three friends that are connected. Like there's two that are cousins, and they're all like distant family members who are all coming together. They happen to be around the same age, and they like the same boy. Some more than others, and then our main character is very much preoccupied with wanting to be a nurse, and so she eventually like kind of like matures out of this like crush for the boy, and she eventually finds her own true love kind of thing. So yeah, this was a really quick read, and I used to read a lot of Jeanette Oak way back when. I read her Canadian West series, I want to say, and that's like kind of like a pioneer frontier story going out west into like the Alberta, like northern Alberta area that I really like. But this series is good as well, and there's a TV show I believe for this one. I've never seen it, so there's that one. And then I'll just run through. I think I have two more for the Retro Romance Readathon. This one has a stupid sticker on it, but it's a Harlequin duet, so they're like rom-coms, romantic comedies. This is Stand-In Bride by Julie Kistler. I didn't read the second one. I just read the first one because I didn't like it at all, not at all in the slightest, because this is about two twin sisters, and they're very different from each other. You have the model twin who, you know, can do no wrong, is like the goody two-shoes, and then you have like the bad twin who is spontaneous and has moved out of state and is working with like celebrities in Hollywood, but she is very much not happy with her career and her where she's at. But she's you know, kind of like not telling tales, but like making it seem much better than her life actually is. So her twin, her sister that stayed in her hometown, is getting married, and so they decide to switch places right before her marriage because she's like, oh, this was my last chance to, you know, live like you did, you know, like you are, and have some fun for like a week before I'm tied down with responsibility and marriage. And it's like, okay, that's a funny, it could be a funny premise, funny things could happen there. But my huge complaint is that the wild sister goes back to her hometown that she's kind of stayed away from because she has like this like, you know, reputation, you know, warranted or not, and she runs into her old high school boyfriend. But we have to remember that she is pretending to be her sister who is engaged to be married like the following week. And when she runs into her old high school boyfriend, like the second time they happen to run into each other, she's like kissing him, and he thinks he thinks that you know, she's the sister. And he's like, oh, why do I like her all of a sudden? I've never really cared for her before. And I'm like, so the sister doesn't tell him what's going on or anything. So it's like the whole like aspect of the cheating that bothered me so much. So I did not read the second book in this series where you get the other sister's perspective and all of that. So this was a huge dud for me, and I just did not care for it in the least. It wasn't funny, nothing at all. And then the other retro romance another romance book for the Retro Romance Readathon is by Melinda Beth Skinner, Lord Logic and the Wedding Wish, a Zebra Regency romance. I think this is the first Zebra book that I've read, and I really like this because these are like the sweet romances. There's no graphic content at all. It's just like, you know, you might get a kiss kind of thing. So that's the kind of romances I like reading. And this is following a gypsy who she grew up kind of in a wealthy atmosphere, but then half of her childhood she didn't. She was with the caravans And so she has an idea of like the ton and whatnot, but she still has like the gypsy part of her where she reads tea leaves and like for like fortune telling, and she like sees signs like a bird flies by a certain direction, certain color, whatever, then oh, that means something. And but her love interest is the Lord Logic. He's a scientist. He likes studying nature and wants to have all the facts, and goes by that. And so they're like constantly butting heads. They're childhood friends put back together after she's been away for like 10 plus years. And they're like, I like the battle with the dialogue was really nice, and I like the gypsy aspect because I don't think I've read a Regency with a gypsy as the main character before. So I really like this one. It's probably one of my favorites for the retro romance readathon. Okay, so then going to a couple more physical books that I read. Listening to Crickets, a story about Rachel Carson by Candace F. Ransom. This is a mini biography of Rachel Carson, and it follows her journey to become a scientist and caring for her mom, and writing Silent Spring, her most famous book, and writing her books about the ocean and her love of nature. And so this was a really nice quick book that's like, I don't know, 50, 60 pages. So if you want a quick mini biography that's well told, I would recommend this one. It's a children's book, so it works for them as well as adults. Let's see, the next one is Covered Wagon Women, Diaries and Letters from the Western Trails, 1840 to 1849. This was a super quick read, and it included like contemporary, like of the time, letters and diaries of these women. There's no illustrations, but there's a couple pictures of maps about the Oregon Trail here, and I have books 1 through 6 in this series, so I want to get to all of them by the end of this year. And now that I know they're really quick to read, it's like more incentive for me to get to them. And then after I read that one, I was looking through my shelves, and I saw Wheat Country by Grant Heilman, and I was like, oh, this kind of goes together, because like instead of covered wagons, they're on tractors. And here's another one over here. And these are, is there any color in here? They're all black and white. And this came out, it's an older book from like the 60s or 70s. 77. And so you have, you're out on the plains, and this is, and it tells you each one where they're from. This is in Ingalls, Kansas. And so it goes all over like Grand Junction, and it goes over here like Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, where they grow other plants. And so it also talks about like their yields and comparing like the 1800s to like this current day 1870s. And so I really wanted to look up current day to see what the difference is. I know that it has to be like these technical, with technology, I feel like it's probably doubled from this this time. And you talk about like the time of like shucking the wheat and stuff, and how with the old mechanism it took all day to do however much amount, but then nowadays it takes like 10 minutes practically. So I feel like 2024, maybe 10 minutes for all so yeah, this is interesting to read about. Okay, so now going to my ebooks that I read. Let me go over here. Let me 1 second to go to my pictures where I saved the covers. Okay. So starting with some of the February favorites. So I went through different book tours lists for their favorite books of 2023, and so I wanted to read one from each of those lists that I have that I saved. And so I have a couple left for March, and maybe into April. We'll see how my readathon events go. But I did manage to read a couple. I mean, more than a couple, like probably 10 or 15 from that list that I created. And so I can't remember who recommended this one, but this is Zero at the Bone, 50 Entries Against Despair by Christian Wyman. And this is kind of like a philosophy book. And that's something I don't read a lot, if ever, about, except for like, when I was assigned in school. But I have read his poetry before and really got on with it. It's kind of like memoir, and his poetry is like, it's like, memoir and, philosophy and religion all wrapped into one, where this, even though it says, 50 entries, it does include poetry, not just by him, but by other authors, other poets that is inspiring him, or related to his like essay. So it's a mix, and also there's quotes not just from poetry but from other books as well. And so this is all about fighting despair. He is diagnosed with cancer, and so it's like kind of like fighting with the idea of dying. And so even though he's fighting against despair, it does feel kind of depressing as you're reading it. But there's always this a little element of hope, and you just knowing that life goes on regardless of your diagnosis and things, it can be hard to wrap your head around. So this was a lot. It was very thought provoking. Is my takeaway from this, and something I would probably want to read again at some point. The next one is another book from the February favorites that I selected. This is by David Cran, The Wager: A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder. The little subtitle here kind of describes it all. This is about a ship, journeying through, and the group gets stranded on an island, and they break off from each other, and they're like kind of, fighting with each other, and then there's a group that has its own adventure from the other one, but there's murder and stealing and like everything you can think of related to pirates or like ship stories all wrapped into one. The one thing, my one complaint is that the very beginning of the book, it gives you the conclusion of the two ships' journeys. These two groups of crew, the ship crew, and so that you could Google this and figure out what happened. So it's not like it's spoiling it, but I feel like it took away just a little bit of the thrill of the story, if that makes sense. But it was still a really good story. The next two, let's see here. So I thought I had saved one other, but maybe it's out of order. No, okay, yes, because I read C.J. Box's Off the Grid, and I also read Endangered, and I was already in the mood to read mysteries, thinking about March Mystery Madness. So I read these two, and then I also started watching. I kept seeing like the sticker on here, and I think one of the someone in the comments had mentioned to me, if not one or two people had mentioned to me, that there is a TV show based off the Joe Pickett series, and so I started watching that as well, and I'm enjoying it. I was actually canceled. It was only, I think, 2 seasons, so I'm in the middle of the first season. But this is about a Wyoming game warden who he's not always sure of himself, and he kind of bumbles into things sometimes. So I feel like he's a likable main character because he's not invincible, and he can get hurt, and his family can get hurt. The first book in this that I read, not I don't know why I thought I had saved the cover, but the Endangered book is where one of his daughters gets hurt and seems to be like almost kidnapped, so he's investigating that. And then in this one, this was like very unbelievable, actually, Off the Grid, because they are in the desert, the Red Desert, and so somehow, without any of them communicating with each other, they are 3 people that he's connected with all managed to pop up in this desert where there's not even a town. So I'm like, it's very unbelievable, but the story, was fast-paced and enjoyable. Let's see, this next one was another February favorites, is Marmee by Sarah Miller. This follows Little Women, like to the T basically, but you're in the mother's perspective, which was very interesting. And the author decided to pull a lot more than Louisa May Alcott did for the perspective of Marmee, because she pulled so much from Louisa May Alcott's own mother and her like social revolutionary ideas that she had, and the fight that she had in her, much more than the Little Women mother. So that was interesting to see in here. And also the father as well. Even though he's like all fighting in the war, the comments and like the comments made about him in Marmee's mind really gives you the idea of Alcott's own father. So that was very intriguing. My one negative thing about this is that it's like 500 something pages. I want to say 400 something, but it felt like 600 or 700 pages. I don't know why exactly, but some of like her anger that she's constantly fighting against, because she comes off as cool and collected and very wise in her presentation as Marmee, even though like internally she's like boiling sometimes. But it was like kind of repetitive in that, and the complaints that she had was very competitive. So it felt like a 600, 700, 800 page book, even though it was still enjoyable. So it was like, I don't know, it was like a give and take there with that one. The next one is, again, another favorite pick from 2023. The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa. This is told in the perspective of the cat Nana, because his tail is in the shape of a 7. So in Japanese, it's short for the number 7, and it's his adoption story. And then they go on a trip, and the whole reason behind them going on a trip and visiting these different friends and family members, there's a reason behind that. It is sad, but very sweet as well, and pretty short to get through. The next one is Beaches, Bungalows, and Burglaries by Tanya Kappas. This is the book 1 in the Camper and Criminals Cozy Mystery. This is a reread for me, again, being in the mystery mindset for March Mystery Madness. And this is a reread. The first time I read it was on audio, and I listened to an audio the first 10 or so, but it's been a little bit, and so I just decided, why not read it with my eyeballs, read the first one, to see what I think of it from that perspective. And I didn't like it. The writing was, to be honest, almost atrocious. Like, it wasn't, I shouldn't say atrocious, but it could do with a lot of editing, is what I will say. Listening to it on audio and having the southern accent, because this takes place in Kentucky at a campground, and with a southern accent, maybe that kind of distracted me. And listening to audio too, like, it distracted me from the writing, because I got on with the audios, at least, because I even, like, this past year, I know I read a couple from this series, and I didn't notice the writing, but yeah, just reading it with my eyes, I'm like, oh my goodness, it wasn't great. But they're still fun and lighthearted to read, and they're like, I don't know, 150 pages or so you can fly through these. But I will say the mystery is very, very much in the background. It's much more about her being in small town Kentucky, with her laundromat group and the friends that she's around, and trying to manage the campground more than anything. So if you're interested in that, then yeah, I would say I would recommend the series. Like, at least give it a try. The next one is for, again, February favorites, from Booktubers favorites, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This was fantastic. Like, talk about poetry. This was very much, it felt like a lyrical poem about nature. Like, the author, you can just, like, feel her love of poetry. I mean, love of nature throughout this whole book. And I listened to this on audiobook, and I can't remember who the narrator was. It might have been the author. But I for sure want to reread this and just, like, sit with it longer than I did. Because I listened to it throughout the month of February, but it would have been nice to, like, stretch it out even more, because this was just great, a nature book. If I Couldn't Be Anne by Callie George, and this is illustrated by Genevieve Godbout. This was left over from a couple of months ago. There was an L.M. Montgomery readathon, and it was hosted by Elizabeth or Lizzie Faye Loves Books. And this is one that had popped up on my library to borrow way after the readathon happened. And so I was like, why not give us a go? It was like 25 pages, a children's picture book, and the illustrations were really cute. And this is all about, what would you do if you were Anne, kind of thing. Like, with the puff sleeve, all the classical Anne of Green Gables things were in here that you would imagine, like her love of nature, love of seasons, things like that. Okay, and the last book here is American Salvage, short stories by Bonnie Jo Campbell. This is the first book I've read from this author. I've heard about her here and there, but I've never given her a go. And this is set in small town Michigan, but there's nothing cozy at all about these stories, and you can kind of tell from the cover the gist of, like, the feel of these, the mood, because there's, like, small town drugs and just knowing, like, poverty, like really, really bad poverty, like rotten teeth and very malnourished, hand-me-down clothes, that whole, like, getting drunk all the time, like that whole, like, living in trailers, that whole grimy mood and, life. And it was, because it was short story collections, and you're not following two characters, a partner, a couple, through their life. You're following many, many different people. It felt a little bit repetitive, not repetitive, but, like, no hope. Like, every single person that you're reading about through these different short stories was it kind of like brought me down a bit. It was very depressing, and the one thing, it didn't have a punch like some short stories have, like at the ending, that like makes you like sit up a bit. It wasn't like that. But they were still good. It was very well told, and all of it was very believable. But it was still at the same time difficult to read, and like I said, very grim, is what I will say. Okay, so I will turn the camera around, so I will show you briefly like the shelves, because each month I am keeping a collection of the books I haul versus the book I am reading through the month. So I will share that with you now. Okay, so I have 21 books on my read / unhaul pile here. So these are the books that I am unhauling. Christy here, the book I recently got at a little free library. Once I looked into it more, it very much cannot stand any kind of read, because it's just going to fall apart. There's a bunch of broken spine and so the pages are like almost getting ready to fall out. So I couldn't read that one, so I'm going to unhaul it. And it's just going to go in the trash, because I got it from a little free library, but it's, again, not readable at all. It's going to fall apart any second. Two in the Far North is one of my absolute favorite books about Alaska, but it is full of highlights. And so, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this and find a better copy at a later time. And then these are books I tried to read for the Retro Romance Readathon, but didn't get on with for one reason or another. Some of these are authors that I really enjoy, like Shirley McCoy, but they were either had like amnesia storylines in there, or there were stories with babies, and I don't really get on with those, with mystery books or romance books. I don't like the single parent story or baby or secret baby or anything like that with babies. So I'm going to get rid of those. And then going over here are the two piles that I read to completion. The other ones I had tried, but so I read all of these. These are the ones I'm going to be unhauling for this month, even though I've read them. And then the pile over here are the books I'm going to be keeping. So I have my Little House on the Prairie series, and I have this additional book about Iowa from Little House on the Prairie series, like in addition, like from a different author. And then I have the Covered Wagon book. Okay, so then going over here to the pile of books that I bought in this month, it's very much smaller. I did pretty good at considering this is supposed to have 0 books on it, but I found a couple at little free libraries, and so I couldn't say no. And so I got a couple. This is for the June on the Range readathon coming up in June, where you're going to read Westerns, and this was like really good condition. And that's an author I've never read before, so I thought I'd give that a go. Then I have a Apple paperback book about a summer camp that looked like fun. And then I have this gorgeous autumn cookbook and event party planning book that I, again, couldn't say no to. So considering it was a book buying ban month, I didn't technically buy anything. So I spent $0, but brought in 3. So what did I say? I think I read or tried to read 17 versus the 3, so I will take that as a win. Okay, talk to you later, BookTube.